Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for another Ward's Auto Fast Chat video interview. I'm Steve Bell, Director of Forecasting and Data Analysis and Principal Analyst for Connectivity at Ward's Intelligence. I'm joined today by Keith Perrin, Senior Director, Digital Transformation at Hexagon's Manufacturing Intelligence Division. Welcome, Keith, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. The automotive industry is probably going through one of the most fundamental transformations at this point of time, the shift to electric vehicles, but also in terms of the technologies that are being leveraged and how they're being leveraged in the vehicle, but also how they're being leveraged in the design and manufacturing of the vehicle. And we've done some work to look at that with you. And there's a white paper that will be identified later that's looking at the fact that really the electric vehicle pivot is that point where smart manufacturing may be the key to success, as opposed to scale, which has been the great most capable aspect over the last 100 years. So let's get started. We looked at this, but what are you seeing in terms of what's happening with automotive manufacturing?
You know, Stephen, I think you summed a lot of those ideas up quite well. You know, for me, what's going on, it's very akin to the idea of digital transformation. It's rampant, right? So media, newspaper, books, TV, they all had their moments. Banking, retail banking had its moment. Retail is in it right now. And the same is true of auto. Right now, the crucible of the automotive transformation we're seeing is in the EV space. As the paper you've outlined indicates, EV is very much a pivot point for, I believe, the whole auto market, not just a segment of it. You know, we see that going on. What we're seeing is this new market is being exploited by new vendors like Tesla, for example, and other companies like them, to realize some of the growth potential that's there, right? We've seen the rules and regulations coming from governments. We know that the market for EVs, including hybrid models, according to PwC, is going to increase by nearly 500% by 2027. That's not far away. So we're seeing this new market be exploited in terms of new ways of doing things, introducing new technologies, new ways of manufacturing to introduce these new technologies by the likes of Tesla and others. When you look at what's been going on traditionally in the EV space, I think your report also highlights well that I think traditionally there's been a belief with the traditional players that perhaps they shouldn't risk failing to meet customer demand, customer expectations, and leave some of this new technology to be figured out by the niche vendors, as they probably viewed them in the past. The thing is, though, that niche has all been grown up, and we've learned from experience in those other industries I just referred to that the guys who were there before might not be the guys that are there moving forward. So for me, the electric vehicle market in and of itself, it isn't interesting just because it's electric vehicles. We're seeing the impact of new ways of working really hit home, a whole new industry that's really starting to reimagine how cars are made, the experience people expect from them, and so on. So that's impacting quality, impact on customer experience, scale, efficiency, new levels of manufacturing flexibility. Right across the board, there's quite a lot there.
So you mentioned some new players in there. I mean, obviously Tesla was the sort of lead, but there are others like Arrival in the UK that are bringing in new concepts in terms of manufacturing. They're sort of micro factories. What other new tricks are the players sort of bringing that maybe the traditional automakers aren't embracing at this time, or should?
I think there's some very good examples here, right? So a lot of the rate of change that we've seen from the likes of Tesla and Arrival is all around the adoption of new technologies, learning those technologies, learning to adapt them and readily apply them in new and interesting ways, right? So in order to do that, there's got to be more dynamic, more focused on the end goal. So ideas like design thinking become apparent. Continuous improvement, continuous deployment mechanisms become apparent. Some of these methods are more similar to the way modern software is developed. You know, Netflix, for example, pioneered things like Agile development for software, stand-up meetings, scrums, backlogs of efforts and issues that they need to be attacking. You know, smaller, more autonomous chunks of iterative design elements that teams can focus on and be responsible for more autonomously. to achieve an end goal. We don't just see that in the automotive space, particularly around Tesla. We see this in other industries. In fact, a company very close to Tesla is doing the same thing, SpaceX, to the aerospace and space industries, versus traditional government, right? They're moving so much faster. So some of those key things, require some new technologies, right? So good example, how do you do Agile with mechanical engineering? You can't do it with traditional methods. Digital twins, digital technologies are an enabler. Now, digital design's been around for a while, but what's changed is the degree to which we can incorporate the real world into the digital. It's not much more than a drawing and maybe a 3D model. We can actually start to simulate the performance of something in the digital world long before it's ever created in reality.
So as you talk about new technologies, digital twins, and sort of rethinking this, the new players and the new technologies, is that bringing in new support mechanisms in the ecosystem, changing the traditional sort of tiered supply chain?
Oh, absolutely, right. So if you think about it, many of the traditional providers of vehicles are very dependent on their supply chain. Right, so the whole business model was wrapped up around doing producing vehicles the way they had been. Here we introduce new technologies with new ways of doing things, a new culture of doing things. So all of a sudden, the supply chain element has to adapt. There's a great quote actually in your white paper. I think there's a chap from Ford. This might be the end of just in time, I think he said. Another element, I think from the same chap, was in 3 decades, and the car businesses hadn't prepared him for what was going on in 2020, right? That idea of continuous improvement, vertically integrated teams, all working on DevOps, continuous improvement deployment mechanism is acres away from what's gone on in the past. Very traditional waterfall methods, really starting to work much faster, much more closely together. So a lot of a greater focus on things like platforms, systems, architectures of systems really hitting home to enable some of that. And it's, again, very different way of working, very different ecosystem.
So, but are you actually seeing that the tiered supply chain, the traditional vendors are adapting to that? Are they incorporating it in their processes as well?
Some of them are, yes. As you can imagine, it's a mixed bag, right? These companies are in a difficult spot. You've got to keep the existing engine of business running while adapting to this new world order. This idea is not necessarily a new idea. Gartner articulated a bimodal idea for enterprise IT, right? Where the new world order starts to accelerate up and takes care of the new business and starts to pull up the old order at the same time. So you end up with almost a 2-speed business. That is starting to happen here. We see the cultural shifts that accompany some of these new ways of working, the new methods being adapted by newer teams and new technology areas so that the companies can improve. So practically, what does that mean? It means investing now in technologies, different cultures, different ways of doing things, perhaps scale later. Being open-minded about different ideas about technology and introduction processes and maturity that go with them. More exploratory ideas, working more closely with their OEM customers, being more adaptive to change. But overall, much more collaboration with their customers, being willing to share that insight, being able to explore new and different business models to some extent together as well. That's where we're seeing a lot of adaptation going on, particularly around the idea of digital design, digital manufacturing. Those things are key enablers for that rather more agile methods that we're seeing moving forward.
So as you've looked at this space, I mean, and obviously sort of you bring different worlds together. What technologies and approaches do you think are going to be key going forward, and that are going to be the sort of the make or breaks in some respects, or if in fact there are make or break technologies?
I think taking a slightly different view as to supplier partner relationship is a key thing. We talked a little bit about platforms and systems and architectures of offerings coming together with vertical teams to execute them. If you think about what's happening, particularly when you get to continuous improvement deployment mechanisms, we need to move much faster than we have done in the past. We can't be waiting around for a physical prototype to be made. We have to go digital. increasingly, digital is the only way we can improve something. Well, in order for that to work, we have to go beyond the drawing, beyond the CAD model, into the way the process or the product actually works in reality. Being able to digitize the real world, being able to simulate that is a simple case in point, right? There's something where Hexagon in particular feels it's got some unique capabilities. We can not only digitally design something, but we can digitally capture the real world, even to the point of telling you what's going on inside a component. We can simulate that, whether it's electrical simulation, for example, or structural simulation. We can start to tell you how that product or that offering or that part is going to work in the digital world and start to iterate there. And of course, once it's digital, we can iterate so much faster, right? And that's the key difference. So we see that happening at the product design level, but also the process, the manufacturing process level, even down to the point at which we digitize the factories themselves in which these things are made. And that's a big difference, right? So you mentioned Arrival earlier. Great example of a company adapting and applying some of these technologies in a very dynamic environment to achieve economies of scale at the micro level, so that it can operate much more locally, being able to more flexibly deliver the offerings that they have in a much more agile way.
And I think that what I've seen, at least, is that the digital capabilities is the mechanism for spanning the traditional silos that have existed, both in engineering, but between engineering and manufacturing, between manufacturing, IT, OT, the production floor, the workers, actually being able to train people in terms of how you produce it. That digital thread is the aspect that sort of links that together, but it's also enabling new technologies like adaptive manufacturing and being able to bring new parts in new ways. So, I mean, the whole space is fascinating. I'm sure you're as excited about it as I am.
I am, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? When you get that vertically oriented stack of folks together, and some exciting things happen. You really see difference moving faster than the old traditional ways where, the mechanical design passes things over to the electrical guy, the waterfall happens, and slowly the organization plods along. In the new world order, it's quite a bit more dynamic, and you see the results much faster than you would have done in the past. And that's the exciting bit, right?
Right, absolutely. Keith, thanks very much for the time and for joining me and also the Wards Auto Fast Chat. You provided amazing information and some great insights, I think, in terms of the automotive manufacturing technology and the players. Obviously, people can get more detail from your website and also from the white paper itself. But thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. It's a great pleasure talking to you, Stephen.
So, that's it, folks. Thank you very much for joining me, Stephen Bell, with Wards Auto and Intelligence, and also the Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence Group, Keith Perrin. We look forward to joining us again on another Wards Auto Fast Chat.